Thank you very much, Mr. Gopalakrishnan. The esteemed dignitaries on the dais, very, very distinguished audience comprising, I think, all the corporate top honchos of the country. I hope you are now a much more enlightened lot after the whole day's deliberations with government, former government, manufacturing focus, good governance focus. I think you've had a whole day full of gyan. And that's something we politicians, I think, are infamously famous for giving out. I don't know how much we practice as much as we can easily preach. We've just had a vote on account, something which really is only a holding on operation, a little bit of an opportunity for the government to give a scorecard of what it has been able to achieve. A lot said which was not done, and a lot remained unsaid which could have been done better. But we'll not get into the past. As the Honorable Finance Minister said, let's leave it for history to judge his achievements or his government's achievements. In any case, I think they have reconciled to the fact that they are getting into history. So let's focus on the future. Let's focus on a brighter and a much more empowered future for our nation as I see the country going forward. Certainly, I'm no cynic. I don't give up easily. I don't believe all is lost. And I am very, very clear that the winds of change that we are witnessing almost across the length and breadth of this country, the anger we are witnessing in the youth of the nation, the anger we are witnessing amongst households, the homemakers against inflation, against corruption at different levels, petty corruption, the corruption at the top, the ill effects that we are seeing in the entire economy of short-term measures, of fiscal profligacy, the fact that we lost excellent opportunities in the last 4 or 5 years, I think, to take the country onto another trajectory instead of going down the path that the nation did in the last 4 or 5 years. I'm quite sure that going forward, I see the nation bouncing back once again to double-digit growth. I can clearly see before me 7 or 8 steps that can once again revive the economy, put some control into the runaway inflation that we've seen in the last 6 years, reignite the investment cycle, kickstart the growth story, and end of the day, meet the aspirations of the people. And to my mind, the real story before the nation now is one of jobs. Any new government that comes in another 3 months from now, the first priority that it will have to address, it will have to focus all its energies and attentions and policies will be to creation of jobs. I have used this statistic ad nauseum. You might have heard it in the past. But I do believe the very fact that Mr. Vajpayee's policies, the policies of the NDA, created 60 million jobs between 2000 and 2005 is a testimony to good governance. It's a testimony to actually bringing some sort of fiscal discipline in the running of government, which Mr. Vajpayee is credited with. And the fact that despite having over 9% growth in the subsequent 4 or 5 years, particularly in UPA 1, we actually saw a period of consumption-led jobless growth. We saw a period where reforms are almost stalled, whether one were to call it the compulsions of coalition politics or failure of imagination. It also was that period which, while many people often try to suggest that UPA 1 was good, it's UPA 2 which is the problem. I personally believe the UPA 2 is only reaping what UPA 1 sowed. Ultimately, the large amount of corruption, the fact that reforms were stalled for 5 years, maybe at the back of the left front supporting the then government. I think the fact that during that period, because the world was doing very well, we just tended to move along, and instead of saving for the future, instead of strengthening our finances, we let loose the purse strings and let the money flow, possibly with the intention of getting some better electoral results. I think all of those steps put together caused an election to be won, but a nation to be lost. And UPA 2 clearly has reflected what could go wrong in the economy. We've seen growth tumbling down to 4.5% is what we've been indicated today. Inflation has been relentless. Current account has bothered the nation. I mean, we have an external debt which is close to $400 billion today. So while we may claim that there's been some traction on foreign exchange reserves, in fact, the minister himself tried to allude to an increase of $15 billion in foreign exchange reserves this year. But I think when you juxtapose it with the burgeoning external debt, that figure pales. In fact, it gets into negative territory. So I think the pressing need before any new government would be to set its 4 or 5 things in order, with a focus ultimately being on job creation. The 5 years, 2005 to 10, saw only 2.7 million jobs being created. I see in this nation a requirement for at least 200 million jobs. Considering the fact that we have large underemployment in the agricultural sector, I mean, 50% of India cannot sustain itself on agriculture, with only 15% of the GDP coming out of agriculture. We certainly cannot have a situation anymore where manufacturing stagnates at 15% for over 10, 12 years now. There's been absolutely no traction on the manufacturing side. If you see the excise duty figure of 2013-14, the revised figure given today, it's absolutely flat. 76,000 crores 12-13, 76,000 crores 13-14. It's a clear indication of where the manufacturing sector is going. So I see these 200 million jobs as the central theme around which any future government will have to plan its programs, plan its policies. And to enable 200 million people to get an employment or a working opportunity, I think the single most important program before any new government will be the skill development program. I mean, to my mind, unless we can actually create working capabilities, we can actually harness the vocational interests of our youth into different skills. And Mr. Modi had actually mapped out all the skills that a human being is touched with in his life from womb to tomb. And he found that there are 5,000 skills that people in a way need in this country, which affect all our lives. It could be as simple as just sweeping the floor or driving our cars. And skill development, which in China, for example, has got the highest priority. They're looking at skilling something like 200, 300 million people over the next 5 years. We plan to skill 50 million people in the 12th plan, 5-year plan. We plan to skill, I think, 9 lakh people in the current year, which is going by right now. But the figures that we saw today in the budget are dismal. We have actually created skills of something like 3 lakh people in the whole year, 3,17,000 people, and largely private sector driven. The government has skilled only 80,000 people. And a skill development corporation headed by an illustrious person such as Mr. Ramadurai is starved for 2 years for an office place to work out of, is given 1,000 crores in the 12-13 budget, which is withdrawn at the end of the year, and then given another 1,000 crores in 13-14 budget, of which only 300 crores are finally allocated. I think any government will have to look at skilling 200 million people in the next 10 years. We'll have to allot significant resources to that, engage the private sector into it, and possibly dovetail it with a program like the Manrega. Why should the Manrega be just giving out money for digging holes and filling them back in? The fact of life is that skilling would require about 5, 7, 10,000 rupees per person. Skilling would also require a stipend to be paid to the person. Today, a common man, a poor man says, I don't have 2 square meals to eat, to feed my children. How am I going to go for 5 months to learn to become a mason or a carpenter? We could possibly budget a 20,000 rupees per person expenditure, give him 10, 12, 13,000 rupees as a stipend or a voucher for coming to learn that skill. Enable him, empower him with knowledge, with technology, with with some sort of income earning ability and use the 40,000 crores every year that we probably spend on Manrega to skill 2 crore people, 20 million people every year, and in 10 years, you can actually put that money to create a nation of employable working people. And then, of course, comes the 4 or 5 areas where these skills can be exploited or where we can actually create jobs. And I'll just list 4 for your consideration. I believe the one low-hanging fruit which we've missed out on for years altogether is tourism. Planning Commission says 78 jobs are created for every million rupees spent in the tourism sector. India as a nation still does not even allot 500 or 1,000 crores for tourism. Can we not as a nation plan that instead of the measly 6.8 million foreign tourists that come to India every year or came last year, can we not in 10 years imagine 65 million tourists coming to India? It would still be less than what France gets at 83 million. A country like Turkey, small country, I mean, I don't know, other than the Blue Mosque and the Bosphorus River, I didn't find a third place, and some of the trinkets in the bazaars there, I didn't find a third thing to do in Turkey. It still attracts 33 million tourists. It's beautifully marketed. It's well maintained. It offers a lot of nightlife. It offers a lot of tourism excitement for potential tourists. Now just imagine 60 million tourists come to India. The current $17 billion that we earn in foreign exchange from tourism could actually be $200 million. Where will that next wave, which the IT sector brought to India, the IT sector gave us 10 years of wonderful foreign exchange earnings, but I don't know if another 10 years can be sustained on the back alone of the IT sector. Where is that large amount of job growth and foreign exchange earnings going to come from, if not tourism? Another sector, which of course is very dear to most of you here, is manufacturing. Now, we've had manufacturing policy being announced in 2011. We've had the DMIC corridor being announced. Today they announced there'll be 2 more corridors or 3 more corridors. Now, I think what the BJP believes is it's time to move out from acts and proposals and promises into an action mode. I mean, it's something typically like what Mr. Modi did with the Sabarmati River. Mumbai has a Mithi River, if any of you are aware of, the one which caused that infamous flood way back in 2006. We've already spent over 2,000 crores or 1,500 crores with absolutely no impact to dredge that river, clean it, desilt it, or expand it. And if any of you has been to Gujarat, and I would urge you to go and have a look at how a successful government-driven project can be done in a time-bound fashion, within cost and budget estimates, and actually transform an entire area to make it beautiful, make it a true tribute to the father of the nation. It's after all where Mahatma Gandhi's Sabarmati ashram is situated. Similarly, the manufacturing sector as a whole will have to be addressed to find out where are the pain points. What are the pain points that we need to address? I wanted to throw a proposition. Can we not plan for a plug-and-play policy on manufacturing where it's government's job in a time-bound fashion to get you your mine, your mining lease, your environment approval, your power, your water, your linkage to the common effluent treatment plant, your PPA signed, and then package all of that and maybe find a transparent price discovery mechanism, maybe auction it, maybe bid it, maybe a reverse auction on the net, and let the best man win, implement it. He goes to the bank has the confidence, which sadly it doesn't today, that the process is clean, the process is above board, all approvals was taken by the government, there's no greasing of palms in the whole process, and there's a project which if they finance can be started for implementation in 2 months, won't have potential project overruns, won't be stuck because the environment ministry is having a turf war with the finance ministry for historical reasons, unfortunately. I mean, it's a situation where we really need to understand from ladies and gentlemen like you here, where are the pain points, what needs to be done, what you need us to address. When a simple thing like governance can be sorted out, I think not by RTI, but by actually removing the discretionary powers wherever we can. And should there be need to take a discretionary decision by a government official or a minister or a politician, can we not suo moto put a speaking order for taking that discretionary order on the net? Can it not be in public domain why a minister decided to go away from established policy? He writes a speaking order and it's on the net, so there's no future threat of a blackmail. There's no future threat that somebody would have some privileged information through RTI, go to the courts or go to the press, sensationalize it, bankers get scared, and you bring the whole, probably a sector or a segment into disrepute. So I think manufacturing needs action. Actionable points can be drawn up. It's not rocket science. I mean, China did not do something which was very extraordinary. They are people who thought through the process. They planned how they will expand manufacturing, and they achieved 32, 33% GDP share out of manufacturing. We can keep crying that we want to do 25% and we have set up a policy. I don't think policies is what you're looking for. You're looking for actual achievement of those policies. Today, I was surprisingly going through, we get a document, I have it here, implementation of budget promises. And it's unreal. So you give a promise that for the working woman, I will create a new scheme and invest so much money. And then you say that we've set up a working group to decide the scheme is under consideration of the departmental committee, and you say action completed. That's not what people want. If there was a scheme to be done for working women, it has to be actionated on the ground, not in the government files and offices. So I think manufacturing is something we can seriously sit down and work on. Mr. Vajpayee had introduced the SEZ policy, which over the last 10 years has got badly mauled. There's been probably a lot of collateral reasons for approving 600-700 SEZs. Even the genuine ones today have become sick. Then they changed the laws on DDT and MAT without grandfathering the past, but that's something they're very infamous for having done on more than one law. And you landed up in a situation that a good policy, an infrastructure creating policy, an enabling policy is today in shatters. I don't know any SEZ which is coming up as we speak today. The third thing I think we can focus on as a nation is housing. Clearly, Mr. Vajpayee's one big thrust area was construction and housing. And to my mind, we need 100 million homes for the poor or the lower middle class, 100 million homes. And in my humble opinion, that cannot happen with government intervention in the form of subsidies, tax-free imports, government giving free houses. I think those days are gone. Neither is it feasible to do, neither it can be done to scale, and neither can it be done honestly. I was in fact suggesting, and I'm trying to work the whole scheme through, and I've talked to Rajiv Memani and a couple of other friends, can we not have a project or a proposal where really people in a room as small as this can run $1 trillion project to create 100 million homes, rural and urban. But the only intervention government does is an interest subvention scheme. You make it affordable for people to own a home. The poorest of poor, if you ask him to pay 500 rupees a month and give him a 400 square foot house with maybe solar lighting to light up his home, maybe a solar cooker or water coming into his house and a small toilet, he will beg, borrow, steal, he'll work his life out. I won't use any other term. But he'll make sure he doesn't default. You know, any bankers here will tell you, the housing loans, real estate housing loans, have the lowest NPA in India. It's less than 1%. And the incremental economic activity, the incremental taxes that this business gives you, I mean, it's something, it's not a revenue foregone as some of my other esteemed colleagues often come and bash all of you with. These 100 million homes are not being constructed. Should they be constructed, they will actually be giving you an incremental government, an incremental revenue of 20-25%. Because anybody in construction will tell you the contracts tax, the sales tax, tax on steel, cement, labor, all of that put together is about 20-25% of the cost of construction. that money can be used as a corpus. That money can be used to actually do the interest subvention. And over 3 or 4 years, as it is, we stand committed to reduce and bring down interest rates to realistic levels, like the days of lore when Mr. Vajpayee was the Prime Minister. And you remember you used to borrow at 6 and 7% those days, not at the 13 and 14 which you are paying today. And can Indian manufacturing compete with China, with the rest of the world, paying these kind of ridiculous interest rates? Can we import goods at 62, 65 rupees to a dollar? Can we actually sustain an economy, sustain infrastructure at these kind of interest rates? So I think clearly we need to address the housing issue. I'm fairly confident that given an opportunity, in 10 years, we will make sure every human being in India, every family in India, lives in a decent home, a home which has running water, a home which has power, a home which has sanitation, a toilet within its precincts, and a home which has a road outside at its door. That is the commitment we have, and that project itself, when I did the calculation, can create 15 million jobs. Just the housing project over the next 10 years. And lastly, of course, all of this is only possible if we were to do connectivity and infrastructure development. What Mr. Modi articulated, for example, in terms of the high-speed train network or expanding the highway networks. A lot of naysayers tried to suggest that, oh, well, how is he going to get the land for the trains? How is he going to expand the roads? The problem is one of innovative thinking, not lack of possibilities. I think all we need to do, and all of you are so much better than any of us, and I'm sure with your guidance and with your support, we'll be able to come up with solutions for each one of these issues. For example, the bullet trains. I don't need to acquire a single acre of land for the bullet trains. I just need to go on top. I have an existing 66,000 kilometers of railways. The world and technology has progressed enough that I could just have an elevated corridor in which the bullet trains would just go above the existing rail network. I don't see any inhibition or any problem of land acquisition. Mr. Modi, when he had a problem in his state of expanding the highways, whether it was a temple, whether it was a church, whether it was a mosque, he was unsparing and unrelentless. He made sure the infrastructure does not suffer. When Mr. Gadkari created the Mumbai-Pune highway, I just saw Ajit here somewhere. When he created the Mumbai-Pune expressway, we did it in 3.5 years. And today, 10 years after the highway was made, or actually 15 years after the highway was made, you can still go at 150 kilometers an hour because the man was honest about implementing it. He was honest about the quality that he implemented and created world-class infrastructure way back 15 years ago when such projects were really only a dream for us. So I think connectivity, whether it's air connectivity, road connectivity, or rail connectivity, can be that one driver and again job creator which can move the needle on the economy, take us back to double-digit growth, and all of these projects will have to have the subterranean overlay of good governance. Good governance is possible in this country. Mr. Modi, our Prime Ministerial candidate, has demonstrated what good governance is in his own state of Gujarat. Our leaders in Madhya Pradesh, in Goa, Chhattisgarh, different states have been role models of good governance. We have run honest governments where you can actually get work done without greasing palms, where there's equal opportunity for everybody. And I personally believe the time is ripe for change. Let's look at a change which is not half a change. Let's look at a change which gives a government stability of tenure, stability and possibility to implement its policies and programs, which is why we as a party are not looking at getting 200 seats or get satisfaction even with the 220 or 240 that opinion polls seem to suggest. We are fighting this election to give Mr. Modi an absolute majority, which I had launched as Mission 272 way back in July, on 26th of July last year. And I promise you we are committed to give India a good, stable government headed by a decisive and visionary leader and bring back the days of glory to India. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Piyush Goyal. Since Rajiv, yeah. We'll take two questions and then, yeah.
Thank you very much for your very emphatic and incisive remarks, Mr. Goyal. It was hardly your current vision that you and your party have, but the vision that perhaps Atalji had, which may have remained unfulfilled in many areas, as pointed out by you. I have a very straightforward and simple questions. You highlighted that it's been endorsed by your prime ministerial nominee, and that it'll find clear mention in your manifesto. And of course, finally, if all this is yes, 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 then good luck to you.
Review.
Sir, I want to talk to you about two issues, one about the past, another about the future. You know that we people from industry, but for some very, strange reason, it has never seen the light of the day. Now we are pushing it over to the next government which is going to come. So I think on behalf of industry, it's our very, very fervent appeal to you, regardless of whether you come into power, you stay in opposition, to make sure that you drive this movement for developing a minimum national agenda, which should not be a subject of discussion, because it is costing this nation hugely. That's number one. Going forward for future, as NDA are very vocal about re-energizing the economy. I think this sounds like music to our ears. But there's one, and then you of course talked about in the last part of your speech, governance, improving governance. You know that when we talk about improving governance, we can't take a view from an altitude of 12,000 feet. About how the governance will improve at the ground level. So why can't...
There's been a lot of debate on this. So what is your party's view on that?
Thank you. Gentlemen, very clearly, if I have said something, it is not top of my hat. It's certainly something we are very seized of. We are very seized of the responsibility as a political party aiming to win this election and form the next government in terms of having synergy of thought amongst the top leadership. Something we have been deliberating and discussing. We have crowdsourced ideas from across the nation. We got something like 40,000 responses when we went across the nation looking for ideas. We have talked to chambers of commerce, including your very own CII, and all other national and state level chambers. We've engaged a lot of experts from different fields. I myself have talked to many people, some of whom are in this room, on different occasions on sector-specific issues where we felt we were ill-equipped to take a final call. A beautiful vision has been articulated. It's in the final stages of drafting. We have also very clear plans of how do we break this logjam. What do we do to reignite the investment cycle? I mean, for example, the other day I was deliberating with the finance ministry officials, and I said, look, one statement by your ministry which says that if any person, any industrialist has a NPA in one company, all banks will stop lending to all his companies. Now you have a person who's ventured, unfortunately now, into the power sector, and you have not given him environment clearance or land or water or possibly allowed his mining lease to be cleared. It's like a force majeure. Force majeure today is not only an act of God, it's an act of government also. Now he's stuck in a logjam for no fault of his. And now you are saying that all his profitable and other businesses also should be squeezed. And you want to create 6 other NPAs or potential CDRs just because he had the misfortune someday of conceptualizing a power plant. I mean, this is the type of short-sighted thinking this government has indulged in. Banks are micromanaged from Delhi. Freedom and autonomy is not given. One day an investigative officer makes a statement that all accounts which are stressed are going to be investigated. So जो छोटे-मोटे decision लेते थे बैंक वाले वो भी बंद कर दिया. It pays not to take a decision. If you take a decision, you go to jail. Not now, maybe 10 years later. So they say we are getting our salary. Why do we take a decision? And these are practical on the ground things. Now they claim to have approved 257 projects worth 150,000 crores. Right? There's been a lot of tom-tomming. You might have had it earlier part of the day also. But those projects, not one has got off the ground. I asked the finance secretary, name one project which has gone off the ground. and he didn't have an answer. The problem is projects are long delayed, financial sanctions have lapsed, the promoters don't have more money to bring in their share of equity, banks don't want to reassess those projects because half of them have Supreme Court cases going on. So that just approving the environment approval, giving the environment approval from a committee is not good enough. You have to think holistically how we are going to sort out the entire problem. Will government support, as they do many times in various countries, like they did in the US, maybe for the automobile industry, that in a panic situation, government has to step in, maybe provide some seed capital. I remember I ran industry 25 years ago. IDBI used to provide seed capital to small entrepreneurs like me as seed capital, or to engineers and working professionals. So government will have to think innovatively that if this 10 lakh, 20 lakh, 15 lakh, I've lost track of numbers, if all these projects have to be kick-started, what are those interventions within a given time frame which can actually kick-start that? So I promise you, we are very conscious. All of us have experience. I personally have been in manufacturing. I've been an investment banker. I am rather an investment banker. I still do that for a living. So I tell you, we are conscious of the realities of the situation, but we will not sacrifice national interest in order to speed this up. So we'll have to balance the nation's interest and the interests of kickstarting growth and getting all these projects off the ground. So we certainly will have to have processes in place, like the gentleman said. We'll have to have transparent processes, fair processes which are equal for all. The opportunity should be equal for all. And it's a well-bought-in agenda amongst the top leadership of the party. Mr. Modi personally is a very good listener. And I tell you, I have a small example. 4-5 days back, I was with him late night one day, and I was suggesting that we should throw this idea into the manifesto, a particular issue. He said, no, but we haven't studied this in detail. I don't want to say it in the manifesto unless I'm clear how I will do it. I said, Modi ji, kar lenge na, itni koi difficult nahi hai. I'm very clear how we can do it. He said, Piyush, मैंने एक हाईवे गुजरात के मैनिफेस्टो में डाला था. 1 साल हो गया वो शुरू नहीं कर पा रहा हूँ. I'm having some difficulties and it is haunting me. One road project in his Gujarat highway is haunting Mr. Modi because he hasn't been able to kickstart it 1 year from after the elections. So he's very clear. He wants to give a practical agenda. And when we come with that agenda, and any one of the issues that I've highlighted today, I'm open to any amount of scrutiny in any great detail from all of you here to justify how each one of those things we are going to implement. So we have well thought of it, and we promise you that nothing fanciful or nothing is a dream. It's all real to-do plans that we have. Well, the suggestion about a common minimum program is an excellent suggestion, sir. But certainly, you will have to grant us our responsibility while we were in opposition, and even when we come into power, if we should get your blessings, to maintain integrity and probity of systems, to respect institutions of integrity, and not have a situation where a government of the day indulges in massive corruption, and when it is being highlighted, and not highlighted based on press or media reports, highlighted based on credible auditor reports, the CAG reports, the government wants to push it under the carpet. When we ask questions in and out of parliament, we are given prepared texts. Ministers refuse to answer any question. If you will see any debate, whether it's on the 2G spectrum, whether it's on Colgate, Antris Devas, I can name 50 scams. We ask tons and tons of questions. A statement would be read out, which did not address a single question being raised, and were it not for the active role of the opposition, and sometimes obstructing parliament is necessary in national interest, also to bring to fore what is happening in government. Otherwise, they will just run amok with bad governance. So I think it was our duty to highlight that. The courts are finally seized of the matter. I don't know if you're aware, most of these investigations weren't even started till it was highlighted in parliament. So we are doing our job, and I promise you, if we come into government, I'm not worried about the Congress doing the same thing, because I won't allow them an opportunity. I'll run the government in a transparent fashion. I won't be giving out licenses and natural resources to a favored few out of all of you sitting here. It'll be process driven. You will all have a fair shot at it. And we would like all of you to succeed. We are not looking at one or two of the other of you succeeding at the cost of the others. Of course, there's a lot of possibility in terms of simplification in DTC that is still possible. My standing committee on finance, headed by Yashwant Sinha, actually highlighted the flaws in the DTC bill that was proposed. ENY helped me a lot in that, ENY, KPMG, all of them. We came out with a report. After receiving the report, the Honorable Finance Minister brought out GAR. Now, GAR per se is not bad, but the way administration of taxation is there in India, it could have been draconian. Similarly, GST. I mean, we are not against GST, but we do have to address 4 or 5 issues about the federal structure. Should there be a calamity in Andhra Pradesh, a tsunami in Tamil Nadu, and they need money for the welfare of the affected people, what should that chief minister do? Should the chief minister go and beg before an arrogant person at the helm of affairs in Delhi, or a silent prime minister who doesn't take decisions and let the people suffer? Or should it wait for somebody out of government to say that, oh, what money we have given from the center for sorting out the earthquake or tsunami is our money. We have given you that money. It's after all the people's money, and the people have a right to that money. It's not individuals who are giving that money. So in the event of natural calamities, how will GST function? How will it function vis-a-vis merit goods and demerit goods? How will it function in terms of the autonomy of the states? Will the center, and does the center have the credibility based on the past experience of making up the loss of revenue for the producing states vis-a-vis the consuming states? These are all issues that have been flagged off that need to be addressed. And I think if the consensus building exercise is done with sincerity,
Sir,
these issues can be sorted out.
You know, obviously there are issues which have to be resolved amicably. You know, we have discussed this for more than 5 years now.
Questions that I raised.
So tomorrow if you come into the government, I'm sure you're going to address this.
Well, we'll certainly address it, and we stand committed to GST with these issues resolved in a spirit of consensus with the states. Well, your ideas about emulating another party is very good. We are open to learning lessons from any party, but certainly we are not learning lessons to let the Republic Day parade go haywire. We are certainly not going against the Constitution of India, which we are very proud of. We are certainly not looking at an anarchical situation, and we certainly don't believe that there's a one-size-fits-all solution to everything. So I don't think the country can hear just one dialogue for every problem and assume that that one dialogue will solve all our problems. We need to think in a much wider canvas. We need to address certainly the issue of corruption, and we have honorably done that. You can ask anybody who's seen our governments, particularly in Gujarat under Mr. Modi, the way that state is administered, the way people are enjoying to do business there, the way agriculture, manufacturing, all are in double-digit growth for 10 years, a decadal CAGR in double-digit. No large state in India has had this kind of a dream run, including Gujarat in the past, what Gujarat has seen in the last 12 years. I think we have a track record based on which we are going to the people, and I think we have a leader whom people will be able to trust based on his track record. I don't think we need to just make fanciful statements or anarchical comments on the system. The system is the same in Gujarat as anywhere else in the country. The bureaucrats are the same in Gujarat as in the rest of the country. It's visionary, honest leadership that makes the difference. And that is what we propose to provide the nation. On housing, Anshuman, you had a fair point. On land acquisition, my personal view is we needed to increase the compensation to make it more real and make it reflective of the current land values, but we should have simultaneously simplified the process. What we have landed up creating is a process which will be impossible in the timelines given. Fortunately, thanks to Mr. Arun Jaitley, who intervened at the last minute and forced the government's hand to at least allow those 7 or 8 infrastructure sectors to remain out of the purview of this Land Acquisition Act. It's thanks to that that at least Vinayak Chatterjee and Ajit Gulabchand's business may continue for some more years before the processes of the new Land Acquisition Act get kind of clarified in courts and sorted out. But I think what we will have to do, should we get an opportunity, is to try and cut the process into more simplified versions, be fair to the dispossessed landowners, give them a fair deal. And again, Gujarat is an example. When Mr. Ratan Tata went to Gujarat, he was welcomed by the landowners with open arms, because we could explain to them what these projects will mean for them in terms of their own incomes. And we brought agriculture, land expanded in Gujarat. So with the agriculturist who lost his land near the cities or in Sanand, was able to go and do agriculture a little behind, maybe 10, 20 kilometers away. So agricultural production has not suffered. Manufacturing industry and business has flourished. And the landowners got back a part of that developed land on which they're having tertiary incomes, maybe in form of small hotels, small businesses. So I think there's always a better way to do things. It only needs an open mind and a willingness to listen to experts such as yourself, rather than believe that we are the repository of all intelligence. And that I can promise you neither Mr. Modi is and none of us is. If any of you has had a chance to meet with Mr. Modi, he's an excellent listener. He listens for 95% of the time you will spend with him. He wants to learn, he wants to know from you. Maybe the poor chaiwala didn't go to Harvard or Wharton, but he certainly has an inane human sense, an on-the-ground real sense of understanding what are the real issues which need to be tackled.
Okay, Rajiv Memani, Salil, and Sumit. 3 quick questions.
Piyush, no, I had a question on GST, which I think we've had a long debate on that. I think it's certainly, I do believe, like Ravi, that I think we should have got over this hump long back. I also wanted to get your views on foreign direct investment. In the past, we have known BJP to be encouraging foreign investment. We know of your views on retail, on insurance also. One hears that you're not really in favor of increasing foreign investment. So it will be good to get perspective on that. And also, I don't want to hold you on, but if Vodafone was to move into conciliation and move out of conciliation and everything else, then how do you see that panning out? Because that will have a real impact on how India is perceived outside. So,
Sure.
So sorry for getting, it
No,
was
why
a
sorry?
simpler
I'm
question
glad.
for getting into
Please
details.
ask the most inconvenient question. I'm okay.
Salil?
My question is on agriculture. Biggest challenge on the supply chain from farm to the fork. The message from the BJP on FDI is a little disturbing because that upsets the value chain all the way. So what is your plan on agriculture, which to my mind is the key to the problem of inflation and the poor man's food issues?
Sumit?
About the steps that you talked about. And the first one you talked about is creation of jobs, which I think all of us agree. And then you also talked about manufacturing, and you were quite passionate about that, because manufacturing does create the maximum number of jobs. And I believe the expression you use is find the pain points and start a plug-and-play system. But the states get very much involved in really setting up manufacturing plants. And the setup in our country. So I'm just curious, what is your plan on tackling this issue? Because different states have different policies, rules. How do we get to a uniform policy?
Thank you, gentlemen. On FDI, Rajiv, very clearly, if you map the last 25 years since 1991 and put the FDI or reform or the opening up process into buckets, I don't think you will find a comparable period to NDA between 99 and 2004. The true opening up of infrastructure, the aviation open skies policy, the Electricity Reform Act, banking, insurance, pension, that all started during that period. After the initial flush of removing licenses by Mr. Manmohan Singh, and Mr. Narasimha Rao in 91 to 94. I think 94 the government got into a hiatus, got too political, they were preparing for elections, then we had two third front governments, and I'm sure all of you are now well versed with the impact of such ragmatol coalitions that India has faced, 4 of them in the last few years. But Mr. Vajpayee did that in a spirit of consensus. No reform by Mr. Vajpayee was sought to be bulldozed through parliament or otherwise. Every reform was with a spirit of discussion, negotiation, consultation, and he took the principal opposition party into confidence. After all, why did none of that get stalled? Take insurance, since you have specifically flagged off insurance. Mr. Yashwant Sinha brought the insurance FDI regulation to propose 49% FDI in insurance. It went to the standing committee, then led by a person who's currently a member of parliament in the upper house, was a minister until recently, and very close to the first family. He came back to Mr. Vajpayee with a proposal from the government, and mind you, Mr. Manmohan Singh was the leader of opposition in the Rajya Sabha at that point of time. He came back with a proposal that my leader, and we all know who the leader of the Congress was, and my party is not willing to allow 49% FDI in insurance. We are only willing to go 26%. Mr. Vajpayee, in his spirit of cooperation, appreciated that he cannot bulldoze it through the Rajya Sabha without the support of the Congress. Apart from that, he generally believed that, okay, wiser counsel will prevail over a period of time. Let's start with 26. And that's how insurance opened up in India. Now, when the insurance sector opened up, certain promises, certain dreams were made. Certain commitments were made in terms of what will be the investment flow, what will be the impact of opening up insurance. In 2010, I joined parliament in 10, so either 10 or early 11, this government introduced. And why did this government, after all, from 2004 until 2010, sleep over the increase from 26 to 49 under compulsions of coalition politics? They brought in a possible amendment to 49 only in 10 or 11. It came to our standing committee of finance. I promise all of you, we went into that committee meeting expecting that it was our policy, we'll make it 49, we'll approve it. And we had presentations by the government of India, by the insurance companies themselves, the private insurers, by IRDA, also by the Chamber of Commerce, which represents US-India interests. They all made presentations to us. And lo and behold, what do we find? We found the private insurance companies had brought in all of $1.2 billion in 10 years of opening up, 9 or 10 years. All of $1.2 billion into the country. What had they done? We did not find one unique insurance product that they were able to show our committee. I'm not deriding insurance companies, by the way. Some of you may own insurance companies. I wish you had done better. I wish you had been more sensitive to the needs of India, rather than, and I say it because I am a sufferer also of the misdemeanors of the private insurance companies, rather than just missell insurance policies of the ULIP variety, the savings and insurance linked products, rather than cheat people with 40% premiums, first premiums, going to the insurance company, rather than get people to surrender policies after 2 or 3 years to shore up their profitability or reduce their losses, since none of them ever made profit. What we found at the end of those 4 or 5 presentations was insurance had not lived up to the expectations. The second thing, there is media here, but I still say it, I've said it publicly on record many times. Second thing that agitated our committee was that the government refused to allow sanitized insurance valuation norms. I mean, insurance companies, as all of you gentlemen and ladies are aware, are not valued on discounted cash flows. Janmeja, it's an embedded value that you create over a period of time. in insurance companies. We asked the government, why don't you stipulate world accepted insurance valuation norms? And why don't you insist, since you are tom-tomming, that we need more investment and all of you want to suggest to me that without FDI, the country has no future. So you want FDI to come in, right? So were we supposed to get more FDI post the insurance opening up to 49? Or were we supposed to legitimize potential transactions which had brought in that FDI earlier in various forms? Rajiv, you and I are both aware of that, and most people in this room are aware of. All that we said was, bring in credible insurance valuation norms and ask people to bring in fresh FDI when they want to increase from 26 to 49%. Can any of you tell me what is wrong in our demand? And it was a unanimous report, 30 MPs, every political party was represented in that committee. And for your information, Indian parliaments work through the standing committees. We are non-partisan, we work with a common national interest, and all of us were unanimous in rejecting 49%. The government again in 2013 brought in 49%. In the interest of allowing it to happen and supporting reform, we agreed with certain caveats, very, very nominal caveats, and then the government slept over it. So it's not that we are against 49%, ladies and gentlemen. We want national interest to be protected when you bring in that 49. FDI on retail we have discussed ad nauseum. We are convinced and clear in our mind, just like we read in various books about what has happened to manufacturing in different parts of the world post large-scale multi-brand FDI. And certainly in an environment where India is losing jobs in manufacturing. Indian manufacturing is finding it uncompetitive. When you juxtapose ourselves to China or the Philippines or Thailand, when wages are also rising, but at 15%, 14% interest, with all the bottlenecks on logistics and infrastructure, Indian manufacturing is not able to come out of its problems. Labor laws are causing us to remain small, not have economies of scale. And then in that atmosphere, if these foreign retailers, and they source worldwide, Rajiv, you're aware of that. So when they want maybe a 5 million, 10 million order of these cups, and they don't get it, they'll import it. They won't find a manufacturer here because we never allowed the clock manufacturers and the cup manufacturers to grow in scale. So we believe we need to strengthen Indian manufacturing first. We believe we need to have a situation where people have jobs and job losses don't become the bane of a future India before we can bring FDI and multi-brand retail. The problems that somebody mentioned about the agricultural supply chain, well, we didn't have FDI even in 2000 to 2004 in agriculture, but prices were low. Inflation was at 2 or 3%. Food inflation was almost non-existent. I don't think that's the only reason. The other day I asked a government official, a secretary in the finance ministry, what is the shortage of food grain storage in India? And what will it cost to set it right? Will you gentlemen believe it's only 25 million tons and it needs 10,000 crores? This government of India estimate. Probably you would do it better. I would rather spend 10,000 crores and sort it out. None of these foreign Walmarts or foreign companies coming into FDI and multi-brand retail are in any case going to invest in that back end until it is profitable. Or if at all private sector has to be involved, I would work on it like the power sector. For the initial years, I would give you an assured 16% return on capital to encourage you to set up cold storages and warehouses, at least in the initial period till it is uneconomical. We need to set agriculture right, not by bringing FDI. We need to give them better quality seeds in time. We need to give them knowledge. We need to help the soil cards be created so that nutritional quality is maintained. We need to set the fertilizer pricing right. You can't have a situation, urea is subsidized. All others are made 400% costlier. So farmers are pumping urea into their fields and the entire soil of the country is getting degenerated. We need to think through the problem of agriculture and find credible solutions on the ground. Of course, the states issue that you flagged off, I think states will ultimately have to get into competitive economic development. It's when Gujarat develops and develops rapidly that you find other states trying to emulate that. So the central government will have to make it easy to do business, and businesses will find the right place and the right mix of state support to be able to succeed. And believe me, it's end of the day a competitive world. We want you to flourish in an open, competitive environment. If even 2 or 3 states enable you to perform well, the others will fall in line, otherwise the public of that state will throw that government out and get a government which will help businesses and jobs to be created over there. So I'm fairly confident states will fall in line. You have states which threw out car plants earlier, now talking of industrialization. So it's something where competition will bring it in. You did ask me about Vodafone. I'm sorry, Rajiv, it remained to be addressed. I think it's a problem of this government's making. My party, Mr. Arun Jaitley and I are the only 2 people. And we had the unfortunate misfortune of being covered on some magazine trying to suggest that we had some vested interests in Vodafone, which I have not been able to crack. But we were the only 2 people who stood on the floor of Parliament, opposed the retroactive amendments. We could visualize that, and you can read my speech, it's on my website. I told the Honorable Finance Minister, sir, you are looking at $1 billion or $2 or $5 billion, but in the process you are causing the nation an agony in excess of $100 billion by bringing in this type of a move. Well, after a whole speech, मेरा तो गला जल्दी बैठ जाता है, तो गला वाला बैठ गया, सब हो गया. Lekin end of the day, all I got from the finance minister was wholesome praise, no solution, and a comment that I have the right to make a retroactive amendment. And I stood up to tell him, sir, I'm not contesting your right to do it. But that right is costing this nation dear. We are stuck with a logjam. It is a situation which this government could have rectified very easily. I mean, off the camera, I'll tell you what could have been done better. But going forward, if we do get your blessings and we are seized of that problem, we'll find a solution. We don't run away from problems. We'll find solutions to these problems.
Thank you very much, Mr. Piyush Goyal. You know, it's not the first time CII is interacting with you. I think, you know, we have been interacting with you, and this has been an outstanding interaction. I have many more people wanting to ask questions, but unfortunately, time has run out. You know, we have submitted our, you know, economic agenda for the political manifesto, and we would like to see better cooperation and better understanding of the industry's requirements in this regard. Please join me in thanking Mr. Piyush Goyal for an outstanding interaction. Thank you very much.